Welcome to Practice Disrupted, a podcast where we find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects. I'm your host, Evelyn Lee, an architect who spans tech as an angel investor, startup advisor, and founder of Practice of Architecture. Whether you're a seasoned architect or just starting in the field, this podcast is your gateway to think differently about the role architects play within our global community. Hello, Disruptors. Welcome to this week's episode of Practice Disrupted. I'm thrilled today to welcome Patrick Chopson, co-founder and chief product officer of Cove Architecture, formerly Cove Tool. What started as a mission-driven SaaS, or software as a service platform, empowering architects with performance analysis tools, has become the first full-service AI-powered architecture firm, a dramatic reimagining of what architectural practice can be. Over nearly a decade, Cove and its investors have poured more than $25 million into building AI frameworks, culminating in Cove Architecture, a practice where design excellence, AI simulation, and real-time decision-making operate in seamless harmony. Their debut project, a multifamily row house complex in Atlanta's West End, was designed in just 15 days, achieving design timeline cuts by 60%, cost estimate accuracy hitting 95%, and iteration costs dropping by 40%. Patrick brings over 20 years of experience in high-performance architecture, building science, and sustainability. His vision? Let AI handle the code checking, cost modeling, zoning analysis, so architects can focus on what matters most: beauty, meaning, and creative impact. Today, we go deep with Patrick on the evolution of Cove Architecture, from SaaS to consultancy to a full-service AI-first studio, how that shift happened, what it means for the profession, and how it's already reshaping timelines, risk, and value. Welcome to the show, Patrick. It's so great to have you back.
Yeah, it's so good to get to talk to you again, as always.
So I know last time we had Sandeep on and we were just talking about the release of your new book. We were also talking about your transition Cove kind of made from a SaaS software product to consulting. And you guys have done yet another transition within the first quarter of 2025. So I'm excited to get into it. For our listeners who don't know who Cove is and your origin story, why don't you start way back when, which actually isn't, I feel like, not too far long ago.
Yeah, so originally we started off as a consulting and architecture firm previously to raising $36.5 million of venture funding. And our goal was always to create green buildings. That was the idea. So when we started making the software, people thought it was cool, raised a lot of money off of that, built what became one of the number one software for sustainability consulting in the architecture space. So we did see that happen. AI 2030 by the numbers, we're by a wide margin last reporting cycle. But the thing that we kind of learned was that it's really hard for people to learn software in the AEC space, and specifically scientific software, where someone has to interpret what does that mean. And so then we realized that we needed some consulting to actually help people interpret it. And then we started applying AI to that consulting. And then we realized that there was some pretty big advancements in the AI around intent interpretation, and then also traceability of information that had occurred in the last 6 months, I guess, that we knew we were going to be able to actually offer architectural services and do that in a way where we could maintain responsible control and also make something from using AI. So that's how we got started into the AI for architecture space. And now I feel like as a full services firm, we're kind of able to deliver on some of those sustainability goals that maybe were elusive as a consultant. So that's kind of cool.
I remember when we first talked to you about the development of Cove as a software, a lot of that conversation had to do with scale too, right? There's only so much that you or that any single architecture firm can do. So the hope was that that software could be used at scale by multiple architecture firms. Where does that lie now with the kind of the current iteration of where you guys are?
Yeah, I think the long and short of it is not possible. I don't think for the architecture profession to probably use something like that in a large way. Now, there's great people at every firm, but that number, we can never get it above 1 to 5% of the people in a firm who could use a really nice piece of software like that. And so we needed to find a way to create bigger impact and also, of course, revenue. So we needed to find ways to kind of combine our technological expertise with, money as well, and make sure that we could have something that would be helpful for more people.
Before we go into what it means to be a full service AI first architecture firm in this world, I want to go back a little bit to Cove as a software service. What was it like to sell a software to architects who, the story I always tell coming from Slack, of course, is architects adopted Teams during the pandemic because it was included in Microsoft 360. We are really tight when it comes to pinching our pennies and where we're spending our technology spend. So what was living in that world like?
It's difficult because, we think about Autodesk, they have you know, of the 5% of the budget available for a firm, you think about 90% goes to staff, 5% probably goes to, just random people walking around the office. And then of that 5% that's left over, 4% is taken by Autodesk for, Revit and things like that. Like I just got my Revit bill for our firm and I was like, oh my God. So, I mean, like that means that there's only 1% left for all the cool tech that we might want to spend on, whether that's like Bluebeam, which is now owned by Autodesk, I guess. And then everything else. So like Cove was a part of that 1% of that budget. And so that becomes very challenging because unless everyone in the firm is using a piece of software, it could be deemed non-essential when times get rough. And so when the economy goes down, it's very difficult to justify spending money on a bunch of different things. You have to streamline that, which I get, but that makes it very hard to convince people to buy software in the first place. And then once they do, then to use it in a way that's more driving profitability, kind of end up with smaller groups of people who end up using some of those specialized tools. And then, those people are awesome, but then who else can learn? That becomes very challenging because you can't just train someone to use for example, Cove Tool in the past. You couldn't just train someone to use it because they might only need it once per quarter. And by the time they got to using it again, they might have forgotten what they learned. And so then from a project manager's perspective, a $2,000 piece of software could be, a $60,000 cost, to the company in terms of training. And so that's kind of like the dialogue between training and the cost of software is something that even for open source, it's very difficult to justify sometimes. So you end up kind of like people switching jobs. The base, I think, knowledge base for architecture remains consistent. And then so we kind of fall back to that mean sometimes when it comes to software. So software tends to be sometimes not the best fit for the solution that we're trying to find an answer to. That's what we learned anyway.
I'm also interested in the notion that you mentioned, even with the software, you need a certain level of expertise to kind of interpret the outcome. I mean, I feel like all the good, wonderful architects out there really want to build sustainable, climate resilient buildings. But if it's true that it takes so much to understand the output of a software, and I felt like Cove was technical, but it was also you guys were trying to make it more accessible. What is the future of us meeting our 2030 challenge or bringing that to fruition if we're always going to be reliant on the next level of expertise to truly get to the numbers that we need?
Yeah, I would have to say I don't think that we get there with software, to be honest. Just having hacked away at it for 7 years, I just couldn't. And I think anybody will tell you who's older than me that's I don't think that's a thing. People told us that wouldn't be a thing, but we tried to make it easy. I think at the end of the day, the expertise and the responsible control problem is the thing that both holds us back as a profession, but also makes us, really good stewards of the client's money. Is we have to kind of know how do we get a thing, and as long as we can't solve that problem, then we're always going to have the challenge of if I don't understand exactly how this thing was made, how can I present that to my client I'm not being a responsible architect, so that's like, I think there's like something there. I just don't think that the 2030 goals are going to be achievable unless we have technology helping us along the way in ways where we don't have to think about it. I think that's how, probably in my view, AI allows us to be able to achieve our 2030 targets. There has to be more of a broad-based adoption of tools that think a little bit more for us and can validate and explain how we got the answer.
But you just said software couldn't get us there, but you think AI can get us there?
Yeah, because then where it's less of the problem is like, what does this mean? Like, that's always the question everyone asks.
Yes, but I mean, you're drawing a very different distinction between is AI a software? And I think most people view AI as a software and AI as a tool. So they might be conflicting views. I get where you're going, but how can you bring the rest of the listeners maybe up to speed on your view of AI is not necessarily just software?
Yeah, I think most people are probably experiencing AI at a level that seems like, I'm not sure if this is a thing, or like, I asked it to do X and it didn't do X, or like, you're kind of like having to or you don't know, but you've read something, and it's like, well, and so it's like you really have to just try to like, you don't really know what AI can do until you actually try doing stuff with it, and it's less like a software and more like the internet is kind of like how I help people think about it. Like, you wouldn't take an internet class, you would probably just use the internet and learn how to find the thing that you're looking for back in the 2000s, when it was fresh. So I think like a lot of times right now, people are kind of, you know, waking up to its possibilities. But like, in my view, it's more like an underlying technology like electricity, and less like an actual piece of software that you learn, and you just eventually, it's going to be a part of every conceivable tool that we'll use. Slack, good example, all the way to like, Outlook. Now you got Copilot in there, so it's like, I think whatever people think now it can do is like just a tiny sliver of what it will be doing in a year or 2 years or 5 years from now.
Let's start with, what does it truly mean to be an AI first architecture firm? Because I think there's a lot of architecture firms out there saying, especially even the big firms saying like, we're prototyping it, we're playing with it, we're integrating it into our workflow. What does it mean to really be AI first to Cove?
Yeah, because I guess like we think about it, we should be AI powered but human centered. So it's like, to what end are we making AI? Is it to just make it faster? I don't think so. But it should be, in our view, that that we increase design excellence. So how do we achieve greater design excellence? By using people who are experts. One of the great things that we've found is that like, the more experienced you are as an architect, the more likely that AI is helpful to you. The less experienced, the least helpful it is. So that kind of puts a premium on training people and like getting your junior staff really ramped up into what does it mean to be an architect without AI, so that you can understand what AI is giving you and if it makes sense or not. So that's been an interesting observation. But yeah, we think about it as being AI powered but human centered, more than AI first, you could say. But it does mean that like, that you could like for example, if I'm able to do something 40 to 50% faster, now I have time to think about making a building truly unique and not just like everything else. Like, I can be more of an architect. Like, every project can be a Frank Gehry level of detail if you have the tools to be able to explore every concept to the nth degree. And then you have a more coordinated project, which is also better value to the person who's hired you, because less errors and omissions, better building, less construction defects. Those things are super valuable to owners.
Are we there yet? Are the digital tools there yet to really begin leveraging AI, even as you just said?
Yeah, I mean, like, we're building our own tools internally. So we have a software team of 10, obviously. So we're actually able to validate every assumption. Like, just the other day, I myself was coding an ADA bathroom configurator, for example. That's going to be a sub agent that runs inside of our overall group of AI engines that are focused on specific parts of the construction process. And so like, that allows us to then make sure that every bathroom that gets configured is checked against the code, right? That's a very basic thing, but something that can be missed. And so that frees us up then to think about, maybe I want to make passionate form, but I want to make sure I didn't accidentally forget, a stall in my bathroom, things like that.
That brings up another point. So you've started as a software company. So I feel like you have the in-house expertise to do the coding. Even as a solo entrepreneur, I am making constant decisions every day on build versus buy. What are your thoughts on right now on building versus buying, especially as the AI space is evolving so quickly and new tools are being made available on a monthly basis?
In my opinion, you got to build it yourself if you want to. I just don't know how a firm could trust something that another firm made or something that a software company made when it's like that core of an aspect of your workflow. And maybe there'll be other firms that band together, and certainly, there's other firms we know that we could work with that maybe will allow them to use our software. But it's really hard from a liability perspective, I think, to at this point to validate something made by someone else. So I think you really got to, if you're going to incorporate AI into your workflow, you have to kind of do it yourself. At least that's our view.
How do you make the decision then, whether it's faster to pull up a Revit model and just do that bathroom one time, or whether or not you want to take this time to code an AI sub agent, which is scalable and replicable to, well, I don't know how you coded the agent, but you would hope that it would be scalable and replicable to all different market sectors.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about obviously there's Revit's been around a while, or there's Rhino or different tools. They all have their benefits, but I think one of the things that you can do is if you're building your own tools and then you're building them, using AI and also to use AI, then you're able to start connecting those things together and then learning over time and recording what did we do on this last project that led to a better outcome. We can track that using, in our internal thing we're making, it has a Git type methodology where we can actually see what it is that we did and then merge those things together and track changes and things that are just probably outside the purview of the traditional architecture process. Allows us to be less liability, I would say, which is something I'm always trying to reduce so that we can spend more time on design excellence.
So you're building tools in-house. What is onboarding an entirely new person then look like to Cove, who is used to the standard Revit tools now? I mean, it's honestly, I don't think it's too much different from all of the onboarding experience that you had with just running a software product. But now you're reliable and liable in many instances to get new employees on board. What does that look like?
Yeah. No, it's a lot like onboarding for software in the sense that you have to have a really strong training program. I remember a firm that actually has a pretty good onboarding program. When I worked there was Perkins and Will. And one of the things that they did that was really nice is they had these workshops, right? Where you would learn BIM from the BIM experts who were here's the standard, do it this way. You're a new intern, you got to make sure you're using the correct families. Don't be copying stuff from any random place on the internet. Use these, those types of things are really helpful. I think right now a lot of our onboarding is for principals. We just onboarded Luca Maffei, who's a really well-regarded architect who does towers, for instance. And so for me, onboarding is just showing him what we can do and what we are going to do. And here's a project you're pursuing. Here's a fully resolved app just for that project. Here, you can share this with the owner and show the FAR, trade-offs and things like that. And so helping him understand what he can do so that he can, bring in the work is kind of where a lot of our onboarding is right now. So it's more so similar to traditional software onboarding where you have to kind of give people a lot of information in a structured way and then set benchmarks and goals and have nice videos and different things that kind of help it stick in multiple different ways.
You mentioned that earlier too. You said the AI actually supports experts better. And I imagine it supports principals very well, especially those that are tasked with going out and winning work, not necessarily doing the work. What happens at a firm like Cove to the doing part? Does that mean we need to hire people that can draft this versus we need to hire people that can code this?
Yeah. So we kind of like keep those things separately. But for like junior folks, for example, I have a couple guys from like SciArc who have done some cool things with AI. So their projects are very theoretical, but then that same skill set that some of the folks, out there are teaching them, like that translates really well into a workplace where I need to think about why am I doing what I'm doing more so than do it this way. It's like, oh, if let me think about how I need to like ask for this thing, or how do I need to like, or this tool doesn't exist, can we make this? And being able to ask that question and question what we're doing is like really important at this stage, I would say.
Which is interesting to me because I always have said that like an often overlooked position in tech, when people look to transition from architecture to tech, everyone's like UX, I want to go into UX and UI. And have you tried product management? Because it's not necessarily dissimilar from project management. But now I feel like you guys are in a weird space where you're hiring both a project manager who is also a product manager, talking to the engineers saying, can you build this for me?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like an interesting thing because a lot of times you show like to a principal with 40 years of experience, you show them something you made, and they're like, "Could it do X? Could it do Y?" And you're like, "Oh, feature list." It's like it's
It's
so
on the
easy.
roadmap.
It's so easy to make things when you have people that know what they're looking for, and that really drives the honestly the innovation speed forward faster. Is when you can find folks that have practiced for a long time, seen different ways of doing it. They're more open, honestly. Like, for example, our head of software engineering, this is his fourth way of coding he's ever done coding, so he's done it 4 different ways. That's a unique thing to have when someone has, 40 years in software engineering, or like they have like 4 years in architecture, they have like a totally more, it's a little bit more free space to work with. So honestly, I'm really enjoying working with some of the more senior folks on the product visioning because I'm doing the product development with my team, kind of overseeing delivery, and then I have these architects that are doing the projects. So it's kind of a really nice way to kind of start creating a more well thought out thing than if it was just some kids in a lab, dreaming up some stuff. It kind of like having that weight of the profession and that time that it's taken to understand what it is that we do, what things are important. I think that's honestly pretty exciting.
It's so fascinating to me how this is all evolving, because you would think that you are like, I want the newest students coming out of school, but you actually need the technical expertise of well-experienced architects. And there's always been this quandary, right, of how do we train students coming out of school to be these experts? What happens to that? to that, because I feel like you're hiring at both ends of the spectrum for good reason. But what does that mean for the future of practice? And how do we train those future experts if they don't have the similar experience that they've been getting just from being in practice?
Yeah, I'm on the construction and architecture advisory council for Kennesaw State University. And one of the things that we've been talking a lot about with there, because they have a really, Dr. Hazem, who's like the the dean of the whole school for that school, his whole thing is like, we should teach people how to think, not what software to use.
Which I believe is true.
Yeah. So I think like what we need to focus more on is like, one, how do we think about design like we've always done? But then how do you learn and reason your way out of a paper bag, so to speak, of like, if I'm given this task, why am I going to do it that way? And like, that is like really, really important if you're working with AI to understand like, what does this mean? Like, is this the right answer? You have to be able to reason your way to that answer, and you can't just rely on the machine. So it's like almost we need to start people off on their in-carb hours and they're like studying for the test, like from day zero. You need to be studying that test because the test will help you learn all the things you need to learn to have an understanding of if the AI is telling you something correct or incorrect. So it's like investing in education is our number one priority in a world with AI. Like, we've got to teach young people faster, or else they're not going to be very useful until they know more things.
Yeah, but I guess the argument that I imagine most people are making then in this situation is so much of architecture and what we learn is let's get to the construction site. So much of the complaints around even CAD or BIM is that people don't understand what a line on a drawing means relative to what a line means actually in space. Like, does all of this that's happening create a greater disconnect? And I'm just trying to figure out, then yes, absolutely, we need to teach and accelerate, but this is teaching and accelerating in a new way, which I'm not against new ways. I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to playing the devil's advocate from, all of the people that I hear and the principles that I hear from when it comes to that hands-on learning and being on site, understanding how things go together that you can't get from, studying for an NCARB test. It's arguable why, for instance, we have the AXP, right? And so many hours need to be given to construction administration.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a principal and you're working the traditional process, you might be working on Christmas Eve trying to get some drawings out because you just know things, right? And other people don't. And I think probably those principals, if they're using AI, one, they're going to get their work done a lot faster for sure because they're going to be able to figure it out. But then two, I think you really need to take that extra time that you're discovering the process and invest that into that time with the junior staff, because that's the only way that ultimately this whole AI and architecture thing will be successful is if we have more people that are more experts, which is what we should be focused on either way. But I think you got to take the time and put it into training people and taking them to the job site and doing the things that kind of back in the 70s, 80s, maybe we had more time to do. And then when we got into value engineering in the 90s and 2000s, and then Revit came on the scene, you have so many people who are the principal who's can't even draw in Revit. So they're I don't even know what those kids are doing, but so there's that disconnect. The technology should be bringing us together, not pushing us apart. And I think that's where AI will hopefully close the circle. At least that's the way we look at it. And I know other people may do things differently, but I feel as the first firm that's kind of really pushing this, we ought to have some responsibility to, do it the right way.
Right. No, I'm just thinking I'm trying to think what a good analogy of this is. And I feel in a way, and I don't know if this is a good analogy. You can tell me if it's horrible. I feel what used to be throw them into the deep end, copy and paste this detail from here to there is now really if I think, because I did K through 12 when I actually did do architecture, if I think about all the maker spaces that we're going into, it's the firm now becomes the maker space and you're iterating and prototyping so much more, which means that you're actually testing how things go together in new and different ways, like you said, kind of designing your way out of a paper bag rather than just being told copy paste, give me the red lines, I'll give you the red lines and I'll return it to you. But it almost necessitates greater human interaction in the learning and development process than we have now. Is that reasonable to say?
I think there was this really nice series of lectures from Renzo Piano where he gave a bunch of students some projects that were his actual resolved ones that were built, and said, find the problems in this thing and then propose the solution. I think what we'll see is that that will be the future of how you teach people is here's a fully resolved AI building. As an experienced architect, I know a few things that aren't good about this. What do you see? And then they'll be oh, da, da, da. And it's well, one thing you missed was this very important aspect over here. And then you'll be oh, I understand how this all comes together. And so understanding that holistic picture is what differentiates you from a kid who's right out of school drawing details versus someone who's a PM or a project architect. That is the ability to spot and understand how it all fits together. And so I think seeing a fully resolved thing every day, you have a fully resolved building all the time, will start to teach you how things fit, why certain decisions don't make sense, and how you'll see those consequences much faster than if you had to spend 8 years on a project and then maybe at the end understand why in conceptual design that little line that we sketched before create a massive headache at the end.
This plays around with how the business model of architecture, right? And how you set up fees. So for instance, if you're training people on fully evolved AI models, that means you're not, I imagine what was previously put towards the production, the money to support a production team is now getting put towards the money to support a product team. I mean, what we can and can't say about fee aside, so much of architecture is wrongfully incentivized by how long it takes us to get our construction documents done. So then how do you guys get around that?
Yeah, so for us, what we look at it is this way. The reason people hire an architect is as a developer on a basic level, they're trying to, if it's a developer project, reduce their risk on in some way and have someone else assume the risk of the design. So if we're going to deliver services to reduce that risk, we have to think about what is the arbitrage of what is that worth to a particular developer, and then deliver those services for the value that we're creating. When we think about like how long does it take to do something, what we've seen, because we switched from in the software space, we did have software engineers who wrote every single line of their software. And then over the last year, we've transitioned to the everything they do is generated and then they check it. What that means is that you actually spend most of your time planning, and then the writing of the software takes like 10% of the time. So like similarly with architecture, we're seeing the same thing where it's like 90% of your time will go into thinking about the design, 10% into drawing it. And so therefore, like there's a difference. You're just shifting the human to a different aspect of the workflow. So instead of having to think about every single wall, now I'm thinking about how does this floor plan relate to the owner's requirements. So I'm able to kind of like think more and draw less. I think maybe it's like where it kind of goes to.
For like the business operations person in me literally wants to like sit down for a week to see how you guys are all working through all of this. I just think it's fascinating. How easy has it been to find the big experts that you're interested in bringing in? Because I also feel that so many of those experts have ideas around the quality of the pen and sketching and, they're who we call the gatekeepers of the profession, for better or for worse, and who they are keeping out of those gates sometimes. So how easy or hard has it been to find those people?
I think a lot of architects are dissatisfied with the amount of time that they're spending, finding things and information, and the ever increasing number of drawings and details that are being made, and the process seeming like they're just working more and more hours, and having less and less work-life balance. And that's true for principals too. Like, yes, the junior staff tends to talk about it a little bit more because there's more of them, but like the actual principals themselves are also suffering from more projects, less time, more documentation, and also like there's a lot of people retiring. So you have like a massive brain drain. And so then people who used to be stalwarts in the profession that would kind of be the backup to someone are no longer there because they're on the golf course now hanging out. But so like that kind of like change has then necessitated that I think a lot of principals are ready to do things differently and do things better. Generally, most people we talk to in the recruiting process are like, find me a better way of doing it and I'll be there tomorrow. So it's not been as difficult. The problem though is this. So think about a firm with 32 principals. Typically they all share the profit. And so to invest in technology would mean that all 32 of them would have to agree that they were going to take a pay cut. And so like that's never going to happen. So that's where the gatekeeping is not necessarily around like people don't want to do things better. It's more so around like the financial incentive doesn't exist within the way that firm is structured to be able to do it. So in some ways you could say it's like kind of not possible because of how we've structured financially
Oh, no, I mean, I think that's one of many reverse incentives like that negatively affect us in ways that we didn't honestly mean to have it. But yeah.
So, I mean, that's what we've seen. So it's like, yeah, recruiting principals, it's very like fun right now because, they all just want to design more, so if you can give them an environment where they design more, then that's why you're in the profession. You could spend your life becoming a finance expert and making lots of money. But if you're an architect, you're there also because you really love buildings and you want to design them and make them as best as they can be. So I think like that's been the big learning for me is like, oh, actually, they do want to do things differently. They just don't have a way to do them better.
What does success look like for you guys? I feel like you just officially launched this, I don't know, 6 weeks ago. I feel like it's been bubbling under the surface a lot longer, though. So, what is officially 1 year out for you? And what would you say success looks like in 1 year? I only say that because we had an email exchange and you're like, yeah, this has been this has been in the making in a long process, like for a while. So, what would you consider like the official 1 year out?
Mm. Yeah, I think like our official launch, we wanted to be in stealth mode for a little bit and just not, talk about something that's, if it's not real, why talk about it? Now that it is real and we actually have clients, I think like probably I would say a year from March is like our 1 year, you could say. But like the actual time that's taken to build all this stuff, I mean, everything we've learned over the last 7 years has gone into like, how to do things better, how to think about go to market, how to effectively market services, what is the workflow, how can you use salespeople and the process, how you can use customer success and marketing and drive all those different things in a more organized fashion than maybe what a typical firm has at their disposal. Learning all that has kind of brought it together. And I would say like success looks like just achieving profitability in the next year is what we're tracking. Because, like when you're delivering, most of the projects that are coming our way are probably like in the 50 to 100 million range, which a bit surprising. I would have thought of been smaller projects, but bigger developers have bigger problems. So, so, so you kind of like can see that where they need things at. And so I think like probably, now that we have different principals on the staff, that are also bringing in their own projects, that it's probably like by this time next year, we'll be a profitable entity, which is pretty exciting.
That's super exciting.
Especially when we've been in venture world for so long where you're like,
well, I was going to say, I think most VCs can't even say that that 1 year out in profitability is interesting. Only because I'm sitting in Silicon Valley and I don't know how often that you get it. Like it took Uber. It's just the amount of cash they were burning versus the amount of money that they were making. Like there's a lot of these really big tech companies that actually, when you get down to the bottom line, they aren't yet. It took them a long time to get profitable, if they even are profitable. I think some of them are still chomping after just market share. And I'm thinking about meal delivery. So what do your investors think of this switch? And what does that mean for them to be a VC supporting an architecture firm, which you don't actually, I think is also a first, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like for them, they're pretty excited because they're kind of like maybe on the front end of like the Silicon Valley investor so basically what we're doing is called verticalized AI services is like what a lot of people have started calling it. And that is like the thing that like most of our investors are truly excited about because like then, with AI, you can achieve software like margins on services, which is what we're doing. And so what that means is then, literally like Harvey just came out with or last year they came out with their AI services for legal things, or there's like different professions, accounting. Every profession is going to have verticalized services in the next year or less. And so we're just one of the companies that's riding that way because it was a technological problem, not a business model problem necessarily, which is what's driving that.
Do you see more opportunities for other architecture firms to go after that VC funding then, if they were to kind of set themselves up similarly?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's like most, like what our view is that like our ultimate top line is probably 10% of the market. Like you can't penetrate more than that. So then that leaves like 90% of the market is going to be, obviously it's like when you go to some countries like, like if you go to India, you'll see like every conceivable form of transport on the road at the same time. You'll have someone, pulling a cart, you'll have somebody in a Lamborghini. It's like, I think what you'll see is that like there'll be a lane for every conceivable type of firm that exists today and the new ones all kind of coexisting in the same space. And like, there'll be obviously folks that maybe our client that doesn't want to work with an architect that uses AI. There could be that. And there could be firms where, the big firms, some of them will make that technological transition, others won't. And then someone else will come along and make something even more cool than what we're doing. So we just fully assume that, but we just think that like, if you go first, you got to be like responsible. And so I think that that's like our thing, that we're really kind of being cognizant of the conversation that we're creating and making sure that we're trying to help people see the right way of doing it rather than maybe just racing to the bottom or something, which is not what we want to do.
Right. No, definitely. How are your clients, by the way, reacting to you being AI first? And what does that say to them, like from a risk profile standpoint?
I think what their major problems right now are that the drawings aren't as well coordinated as they used to be. That's the number one problem a lot of times. And also the architects are not delivering on time consistently. And this has been mostly due to the principals retiring, who did business development, managed projects, and had that institutional expertise.
That's what you're hearing is just the problem from clients that you're chasing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's what we see as the actual problem is like, the clients themselves, they don't really care how the sausage is made, but they want to know like can you deliver on time, and can we make sure that there's not an ADA compliance issue? Like that's what they're actually concerned about. That's their business objective.
I feel like so much of the talk around architects' hesitancy to move forward is one, what they perceive as lack of reasonable control. So I'd be interested in kind of like your response to that. But also that, these tools or some of these visualization tools put too much in the client's hands, and then you're like directed by the client. So let's backtrack a little bit. What is your response to AI and reasonable control? And I think this goes a little bit back to the how you code, right? AI is generating and the humans are still checking.
Yeah, that concern that they have is very legitimate. Like if you are generating things and you don't know how those things come to be or the assumptions of the underlying model, absolutely a massive risk. That's why a lot of firms have banned the use of AI. That's a reasonable legal response to something that you don't know how to control. So I think that like that represents a very rational response to the technology, given its, historically when AI first came out, you couldn't validate anything. Now you can validate everything and you can trace back everything. That was a big innovation that allowed us to move forward. So we could actually validate, where did we get that exact answer from? Oh, it's this section of the code and this thing. Okay, now we feel comfortable and we can create, ways of relating data together to validate that. That's why that we feel comfortable doing it. But like, I feel like that's probably why other firms don't feel comfortable.
So another question I have for you, and one that I hope comes out of this transition to AI, is kind of the democratization of design tools, right? Like that the small firms can compete more heavily against the medium and the large size, maybe not head to head with, here's to wishing, right? Head to head with the large firms too. But looking at the model that you guys have now, you're VC backed, you are heavily investing in product development, and you have the money to do it. Is there a point where there is kind of this democratization of design that allows not the one person architecture firm that becomes the unicorn, but is there something on the horizon that could allow the one person firm to do so much more than it ever did before?
I think that like generally speaking, you'll see other tools and other software technologies come out with aspects that give any firm the ability to like be better and do better. It's probably just a matter of time, to be honest. But like our goal is to be a large firm. That's not oftentimes like the goal of most practices. Like sometimes you're just a local firm and you like doing 10 projects a year. It's a lifestyle business, and like that is the goal is to like do some bespoke 10 houses, right, or something like. And that's like a perfectly legitimate business model that a lot of people are going to continue to do, and these tools will just make it a little. You'll have tools that'll come along in every software. It'll just make your life a little bit easier. But I think like what we're doing is maybe more so like what you would probably see a large firm do, which is you want to like create a system and a process and like be able to expand and have multiple locations where you're practicing with people. That's like our intent, right? That's maybe more so concerning to a large firm. I don't know that will really affect a small firms out there. Like the majority of firms won't even perceive really any difference, I would say. But for us, I think working with those firms as partners is something that we're actively pursuing. So it's like if there's a small firm in a location, we'd like to partner with them and have that like local human touch to what we're doing. So I don't know. I think like the democratization will be in along certain verticals of the workflow more so than a holistic workflow. It's more fragmented somehow, and I think there's just more winners, but different winners than the people who are currently. Like the large firms today may be different sized later, and then small firms today who adopt AI may be larger. I think it's going to be a real opportunity zone, to be honest, of different people emerging. Because like think about HOK, their big innovation around multi-office work. Patrick McLeany and all those guys back in the day, and then they created like this massive value, and then everyone kind of copied it. You'll kind of see like the similar things will happen, I think.
So another thing that I always found interesting about Cove as a tech company is you have an office where everyone shows up to. And we've had these conversations before because Slack benefited from flexible and remote work. Have you changed your mind at all about that? Or are you opening offices where all your people are? How's that working?
Yeah, I think you got to be in person for architecture, but I think you don't have to be always in person. There's just too much like I got to look at this page of actual printed paper and like talk about it with people. And I think like junior staff suffer the most when you go fully remote. So I think like our view is that to achieve the proper amount of like training for junior folks and actually like ramp in a cohesive way, if you're doing something new, you really got to be in person a little bit more than every once in a while. So we still maintain that kind of research that is more originating from the software world, like Microsoft, definitely kind of like transfers directly to the architecture world with PMs loving remote work, but junior staff not, if that makes sense.
So where are you guys hiring and growing right now? Are you actively hiring? I feel like you guys are.
Yeah, so right now we're looking for project managers who are licensed. We're also looking for other principals as well.
What is your hope now for, I mean, 10% of the market is, I'm sitting here going, yeah, but actually I feel like that's an aggressive goal. Like if you're considering the global architecture market, which as a large firm or the goals of to be a large firm is, I imagining it's 10% of the global market then. What is your hope now that Cove has on the future of architecture and practice?
Yeah, I think like the goal is to be in the top 5 firms sometime in the early 2030s, I think is where we're currently shooting for.
Are you doing a full service firm? So are you bringing engineering in-house too with all of your AI tools? Or how are you working on coordination given everything that you're doing?
Currently, we're just focused on full service architecture. And the reason for that is the engineers are always waiting on the architect to do something. So we don't think that the engineers are the speed limit to better design, to be honest. And like my background is also mechanical engineering. So I've worked in both firms. So I do know like the speed differences are like astronomically different between, an MEP versus an architect.
Well, I always joked like the difference between drawing a single line on a drawing versus actually conceiving of the entire drawing set, but neither here nor there. But yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll see that is probably where we'll stay firmly focused is the architect. That's the big problem, that we got to solve.
Yeah. What is the big hope regarding, I think, going back to your original premise of building a more sustainable future? If Cove Tool found all of the success that you will hope it finds in the future, what does that look like to you?
I think a more beautiful and sustainable world is like the one that where our firm and others have made that transition to incorporating AI and therefore real sustainability, where we actually know exactly how much carbon our building is using at all times, how much energy we're using, every time we make a change, we know that we've put that up or down. Like those types of things are what we're really excited about. And I think like if you could create a world where every building is like perfectly designed, uniquely designed, everything is like bespoke, where you can see an individual person's style coming through in their work, rather than a firm style or a Revit style or things like that. I think if the world is more designed and more bespoke, I think that is like the world I would want to see. And that's what I'm hoping that we can do with Cove Architecture.
Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for joining us today on an episode of Practice Disrupted. If you like the content for today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast. Be a part of the conversation by joining me, our speakers, and other disruptors in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is Practice of Arch. That's Practice of ARCH. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop us a DM and say hello. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.